It's all about speed. The customer has a problem and they want to get an answer fast.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Confessions of a B2B Entrepreneur. My name is Tom, your host, and today we have a big interview with Mark Sapes. Mark is one of the co-founders of a company called Papermark who are exploring a very interesting and I think powerful business strategy for a new SaaS tool. It's bootstrapped. It's in the deal room space and it's also open source. So we understand in this interview what is the benefit of being open source. And it turns out there are quite a few. We understand their current revenue levels, where they're trying to get to, how they're doing it, etc. So really enjoy this interview and we'll jump into that in a second. Before we do that, quick shout out to Fame for producing the show. If you like a show like this, please go to fame.so and request a proposal. Let's jump into this discussion with Mark now. This episode is sponsored by Mailtrap, an email delivery platform designed for product companies. Go for high deliverability, growth-focused features, and industry-best analytics. Get 20% off for all plans with our promo code B2B Entrepreneur. Check the details in the description below. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
So you are building Papermark in a way that I think every bootstrapped founder or founders should grow a company specifically. And I want to jump into a LinkedIn post I saw recently where you're saying about the top 3 things you're doing to grow the company. So can you outline what the 3 things are? And then we can talk about how I think remarkable or interesting they are.
Yeah, absolutely. No. Basically, the top 3 things that I discussed in that article that you mentioned is, for one, we're betting really heavily on our product and on SEO, which kind of like kicked off our initial growth phase. And then the third part is, I would put them together, like customer support and feature requests. Our initial growth came really from SEO. We're in an existing market with Papermark in the virtual data room space that existed basically for 20 plus years now. And there's a lot of old players that over time have gotten really stale when it comes to SEO content. And we just came in with a new approach, ranked really highly on like alternatives, and saw that a lot of people were switching over from these incumbent tools in search for new and modern alternatives. And so we really took advantage of that. The second part is really that product viral growth flywheel that we set in motion, because access to data rooms and documents, whether it's pitch decks for a fundraise or anything else, they're shared with a link through Papermark. So they basically share our domain for free. And that gives us that really positive viral feedback that the more people use our product, the more people share it, the more people see papermark.com and check it out, maybe sign up and become customers or users themselves. So I would see our product really as the second growth channel. And you always hear about this like product-led growth, and I feel like this is really coming together here. And then the final one, I think it's customer support and feature requests. It's all about speed. The customer has a problem and they want to get an answer fast. Using your tool is maybe not the most important thing that they do in their day. They just want to get something solved, which should have worked in the first place, or they have a simple question that they just want an answer to. The faster we respond to these requests, first of all, the happier they are, because they just don't expect that in general, because everyone's jaded with like customer support being like bad and automated, like bots replying, there's like blanket responses. But we try to have like a very personal touch and just be as fast as possible just to help them with the initial request. And the response that come back are always like super crazy. Everyone's so happy. Everyone's like, the first line is always, thanks so much for the swift reply, or thanks so much for getting me back so quickly. And feature requests, very similar. No one expects a software product, to build something that a customer requests. Every customer has like wishes and requests, and they just shoot them out into the void and like hope that maybe someone listens and maybe in a year it's being built. And our advantage as a startup, but also in the open source space, is really that speed to market, and that we can ship fast and deliver something fast without having to go through 3 product managers approving different flows of the application. The customer just wants something, we can get it to them faster than they expect, make them happy, and that also creates a positive feedback for them using our product.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on in the three answers. The first thing I'll say is in what I'd like that you guys have done is you've taken an existing product and you're creating just a slightly different and better version. And so what that means is that the one growth channel, traditional growth channel that you're actually pursuing is a relatively easy one to pursue, which is SEO, right? People are already looking for the thing. And so if you can create content that's slightly better than the competitors, then you'll get customers. So that's great. And then the second part is that you have this built-in virality. So if you just focus on making those customers happy and therefore the customers use the product more, you increase lifetime value, but you also then increase the referral rate, which in reality is just increasing the lifetime value further if every 10 customers refer 2 more. So it's just like a very, like the opposite of somebody building a product that's like completely new, doesn't exist, and then just doing like loads of cold outbound, like that's the opposite strategy, which I think has quite a low likelihood of working. Whereas here we've built the growth engine around the opportunity really well, as well as selecting the opportunity quite well. Would you agree with what I just said?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe to add to that, it's also our customer already knows what a virtual data room is and why they need it. So we don't really need to change the behavior of the customer. And that makes it also very easy for them to adopt and switch over from an existing tool. I think that also helped with kind of the onboarding, and like the customer support requests that then come in are not really related to why do I need like a virtual data room, or like everyone that converts to a paying customer within the first 4 hours of using it. So, 80% of our customers that convert to being a paid user convert in the first 4 hours. The rest 20 just take a little bit longer, but we don't need to educate the customer. I think that's the point. And that also makes it easy kind of like to funnel that product growth as much as we can. Whereas if we had to, if we build it something like completely new, had to educate the customer, like maybe change their workflow, what they're currently doing, then of course we'd be stuck in this like education phase where we're sending them like an email every second day and like telling them like, use this feature and then this feature and then this feature. And then hopefully at the end of like a week, we can maybe convert them into being a paid customer if they haven't churned but yet.
How strategic, like, did you guys see that there was like a data room market and that there was loads of old archaic players? And then let's say you're like, okay, let's go for that. Then you're like, okay, SEO and then focusing on building an amazing product is the way to grow. So was that strategic or did you like stumble upon it?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of both. So initially it was really just, I wanted to prove out that, with the open source path that we went initially with Papermark, that you can build a product out in the open as an open source product and still kind of bringing that kind of like capitalism mindset and like actually commercialize the open source project that you're building. And it felt like with my background as a natural way to kind of target the data room market, or at least the like fundraising / pitch deck sharing market initially, and now building it out to the data room market. And then I guess there's also definitely luck involved that it just happened to be that DocSend got acquired by Dropbox, like just a couple of years earlier. Everyone was kind of like looking for an alternative to DocSend, which is like the big player in the market for startups. And we positioned ourselves like head on against them. And we're able to like really stir interest in our customers, like just from early on, like from the first day, basically. And then it was clear, like everyone's looking for an alternative. Everyone wants a solution. And then we just went full on and like just build out the product. And the data room came naturally as our customers started using us. They naturally came over from the data room's products because they were much older than DocSend. So like they were plus 15 years old, these products in the market, and they charged abhorrent rates per page pricing, per megabyte pricing. So something so archaic that just shouldn't exist anymore in today's age. So for us, it was very strategic to position ourselves against them as well. And yeah, the SEO play was just very easy to kind of make that happen because their content was stale. Everyone was looking for an alternative, and like we were just there at the right time in the right market, I guess, with the right content that we provided.
Well, let's talk about, I wanted to get onto this, the other thing, like you're creating a product that already exists, but you're building it in a slightly different way, which is the open source thing. Now, you might have to educate me here a bit, because my question or thought here is, what are the benefits of being open source? If you're charging anyway for like the proprietary version, what are the benefits of being open source? Apart from the brand, like the branding and like the ethos behind it.
That's a great question. And I think that's like every open source project, every commercial open source project gets that in one way or the other. Open source for me was really a belief thing. So I believe that source code itself is not the mode in like 90% of the cases for a software product. It's typically other things like distribution and go to market, the way that maybe the customer's being talked to, or like the product looks and feels. So just pure software, source code shouldn't be the mode. And that's the case with a lot of these proprietary businesses. Then the other one was really, I wanted to prove out the point that it's possible to build out an open source project, commercialize it, and therefore help maybe forge a path for other open source contributors or maintainers who are looking to make a living off of their open source project and kind of be self-sustaining. And that was kind of like another way that I wanted to kind of prove out on like myself on an example. And then you can build a community with open source, which is just something that you can't really do well with a closed source business. And the upside or the flip side for Papermark being open source is that at the time or even now, there's no real kind of open source virtual data room like competitor. So we're basically carving out our own niche in this market where everyone else is competing on the same premise. We're a closed source virtual data room like software. We come and like we just take the same market, but like we put an open source in front of it, and all of a sudden we created our own category. And now the competitors kind of need to come towards us if they want to compete in our space, because they can't all of a sudden be open source. So it's a very competitive edge, actually. And especially if you talk to like enterprises and more larger companies that have maybe different jurisdiction requirements or regulatory like requirements that they can't use a cloud provider, for example. For them, open source might be the only way to use data room compliantly, right? Because they can then host it on their own servers. It's already basically vetted because the code itself is public, so they can inspect it even before using it. They can have maybe their security team look through the code and audit it freely because we have nothing to hide, and like you don't have to take our word for it's being secure, so you can see it yourself. And yeah, the other thing is definitely that the open source aspect of it just makes it very accountable, and every like change that happens in the project is basically out in the open. So whether it's a feature request that's being built in a certain time, like everyone can technically see the audit log of what's happening in the source code. So there's no way you can hide behind being slow or lying to your customers or something about a feature being there, but it's actually not there, and so on.
Do you think you lost any revenue because someone who was going to become a customer has just built their own instance?
I don't think it's like substantial. So sure, there's some companies that like or prefer self-hosting, and that's why Papermark is there. But they're primarily the bigger customers and the bigger accounts. They would never just go on and like host some random code off of the internet. They would always prefer to kind of go first of all, the compliant way. Maybe they don't have the expertise themselves to host it, but they need that self-hosted component, which they can't get from existing providers. So they would always opt for self-hosted or open source versus closed source, as long as it's there. But they might not want to handle the operations of self-hosting it themselves. So that's like you're discussing between like the operational side and the like compliance side. So compliance-wise, they love the open source. They want to go with that. But operationally, they don't want to manage themselves. So they typically come to us. We set up a separate instance for them on their infrastructure. And either they have someone off their team or like someone on our team helps them with the deployment and then ongoing maintenance. But it still runs on their system, on their infrastructure. So they're fully compliant in their jurisdiction. And then the compliance team is happy. So yeah, from that regard, I wouldn't say it's like lost revenue.
Cool. How are you doing with the 1 million ARR goal?
Yeah, it's good. It was a crazy goal that we had in the beginning of the year. And we just said, okay, like, what do we want to achieve at the end of this year? And yeah, we just crossed approximately 60,000 in MRR. So we're like, I would say maybe 3 months away from that goal, maybe 4 months. And we'll, at this pace, definitely hit it before the end of the year. And then, we have to think about like what other things are we aspiring towards and what we want to achieve next.
Yeah, I need another goal. Where were you at the start of the year? Was it 250? I think I read somewhere.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, we were at 20,000 MRR, roughly added like double that in just the first 1.5 quarters.
Obviously, now you're doing a bit more content stuff, but the only things you've been working on in order to go from 20 to 60 is those 3 things we discussed, which is founders doing customer support, being really fast, building features really fast, product-led growth, and then SEO.
Yeah, exactly. We wouldn't even have time to do sales, like outbound sales. It's just, we are fortunate enough that our customer base is like quite big now and that we have a lot of feedback coming from them naturally because we built that trust initially with our, speedy customer support and resolving like feature requests or like support issues fast, that they naturally just write us and they know that we deliver when they have a request or a question about something that they would love to see in the product. And typically, obviously, we always evaluate whether this feature is a kind of like a one-off just for this particular use case of this customer or this user, or whether it can be used across the entire product palette and like for everyone, this would be beneficial. And then depending on that, we'll like ship it faster or just ship it for this one customer behind a feature flag or something. And then we try to balance, I guess, complexity with customer happiness as well, because that can spiral out of control very quickly.
I think the team is quite lean at the moment, right? So where are you investing the excess cash, assuming there is excess cash? You don't have some big costs hidden somewhere.
Yeah, it's a good question. We're thinking about that as well. There are natural things like, obviously, we want to invest in our team. So we're not funded externally. So everything is revenue based. So we want to give that back also to our team. We also will start funding certain open source project that we're using in our tool. And we want to give back to that ecosystem, although I don't like donations in open source because it's kind of like an easy way to transfer funds from 1A to one place, but it's like doesn't solve the problem of sustainability. But that's definitely one thing. And then I think the other thing is just boring, like invested in like an ETF or something like that and exploring different growth option for the business and the product. We're running a couple of like experiments with kind of like adjacent products, but also new kind of like distribution strategies and just like see how we can like grow these like small factors and like whether it's a new distribution and then like make this sustainable also, just like the other 3, we managed to make them sustainable.
Yeah, makes sense. I know that you had like extensive startup experience prior to starting Papermark. If you had to list like 1 or 2 like crucial learnings you had from that experience that has enabled Papermark to work seemingly well from the outside, what would you say they are?
I started a company like my first company around 9 years ago, and the setup and everything was like very different. I think if I could go back in time, maybe back in time it wouldn't work. That's also like the thing about the era that we're currently in, right? Whether it's like AI or kind of like this post-COVID remote global world where online calls and like working remotely is just normalized. But I would definitely try to stay smaller, longer. And that's not only because we could like stretch the runway or bootstrap ourselves better. It's also about you really learn about, everyone talks about product market fit. And we were asking ourselves back in the day, like always about like, are we at product market fit already? And surprisingly now, I like never even think about that anymore. Just like there's so many other things to do. And I feel like from people that have found product market fit, they always mention that they stayed really small until they kind of had to grow their employee base or like their company base because they couldn't handle either the requests anymore. And that kind of like indicated to them that they were hitting that product market fit, that elusive product market fit that everyone talks about. So I kind of feel like it's the same currently, versus back in the day, we were like focused a lot on like, okay, we need to obviously experiment more, but we also need more headcount. So we were kind of like playing startup in a way, like we're doing all these things like raising money, hiring people, building a product, getting some customers, but we're not doing it properly. We're just trying to rush through it in a way. And now it felt like a lot more sustainable.
It's a really interesting point that you make, I think, in that a lot of it's quite easy to get distracted from the real thing, which is building something and delivering it to people. When you're in like that typical VC startup TechCrunch environment. And it seems like what you've done at Papermark is that you've literally only done that stuff with a bit of SEO and like forgot about all the other stuff that maybe you went through before with the previous company, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's also like it's been such a long time in between those two companies. And again, the ecosystem and everything around it has changed a lot. Like bootstrapping wasn't really an option back in the day. Like 9 years ago, there was such a focus on like getting venture capital funding into your startup to make a name for yourself. And now I feel like all these things all of a sudden are possible, whether it's just because the startup cost is much lower. I remember back in the day, we had lawyers set up like a Delaware C Corp for us. I don't know how much it cost because it went off of the funding, but now it's like a one-click setup, which takes less than a day with Stripe Atlas to get the same exact entity up and running. Then, of course, remote, I already mentioned that it's possible. Whereas back in the day, I remember when we were at Demo Day, the one thing that our investor, and like, he's really good, but he told us like, we need to continuously say like, we moved here, as in San Francisco or the Bay Area, because no investor wants to invest in a company that's out of Berlin and like might move back to Berlin. So we moved here. It became this like go-to sentence whenever we met an investor when they asked where we're from. But now like globally remote is like a thing and it's totally acceptable. We hire not through like application, but through our open source contributor base. That's also a game changer because the contributors are already intimately familiar with our tool, with our product. They might even have been in the same space, so they understand where we're coming from. Whereas before, of course, employee onboarding, you have to explain to them why we're changing the world and everything like that. And now it's just real, like we're building for our customers. They need it on a day-to-day basis. If it breaks or if it goes down, we'll get like instantly messages about like, that something's up. And like people rely on our product. And yeah, I just love building software that's being used. I think that just sums it up in the end.
That's another benefit of open source, isn't it? Like the developers you hire can already be trained on the code base, and you can also have seen their work if they've contributed, etc. That's definitely something that I didn't consider.
Totally. Yeah. It's a game changer.
We actually haven't mentioned there is another channel you guys have been testing, which is LinkedIn. And so what we're going to do is send everybody listening to your LinkedIn to follow you, because a lot of the info that I've shared here is because I found it on LinkedIn. Like you're being very transparent. And for example, with the growth goal, is there anywhere else? Obviously, papermark.com, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
And then, which is quite an expensive domain. How much do you pay for that?
Yeah, we had actually a post about that as well. We paid $20K for it, but we didn't buy it like when we started. So to be fair, like don't buy a $20K domain when you just start your business. Buy the cheapest domain you can find with like the nicest name. So we had papermark.io first. And then over time, I had acquired like papermark.co, which is like com, but like not really. And then I saw like papermark.com just hanging there, being available, sitting at like this 19 to 20K range. And it always felt like a lot because, like I said, in December, our like revenue for that month was 20K. So like, are we ready? Are we at that level where we can invest like a month's worth of revenue just on a domain? But yeah, in the end, like I'm really glad we did that move. And yeah, I'm happy with the domain. Everyone seems to be happy. The transition was extremely smooth.
Yeah, it's almost like a leap of faith, isn't it? But it seems like it paid off revenue-wise. We've always had fame.so, just copying Notion, because that was the best option for Fame. And then I get brokers coming to me, asking me about fame.com, and I haven't asked about the price yet, but I think it might be more than 20K. So I'm not sure about that. Papermark.com, your LinkedIn profile that will link below. Anything else we should mention or link to?
I mean, check out our GitHub repo. If you're interested in the virtual data room space, leave us a star. Yeah, we'll probably link that also below.
We absolutely will. Mark, it's an epic story. And I can see like how much you do like writing code that people use by the smile on your face. If you're listening to audio, you won't be able to see it, but it's just great to see. It's an epic story. You guys are executing really well. And I look forward to seeing you get to, I don't know, 2, 5, 10 mil ARR. Let's see.
Yeah, let's see. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, team, thank you so much for watching / listening. If you enjoyed that, please go to Apple Podcast, leave a rating and review, send me a screenshot, either by email, tom@fame.so, or on LinkedIn, and I'll get you a shout out in a future outro to the show. Thanks to Fame for producing this episode. Thanks to Mark for coming on, and thanks to you for listening.